You're watching Amador County's local television network, TSPN. And now back to a TSPN outreach presentation. The Amador Water Agency's Director's Midterm Update on TSPN.
And we're back this morning. We're talking with Amador Water Agency Directors Paul Molinelli Sr. Paul is the board president this year, and Art Toy. Art is the board vice president. And we're going to talk now a little bit because we realize in some of our outreach that people don't necessarily know where their water comes from or how it gets to they may know roughly where it comes from, but how it gets to their neck of the woods. So we thought we'd take a little time to talk about since we're talking about water service, talk about the 4 water service areas in Amador County, because they are separate, even though they're all part of the Amador Water Agency. So where does the water, for most people, originate?
Well, for everybody except for Comanche and Lamel, the two small that are on wells, everybody else gets their water out of the Mokelumne River.
Mokelumne River, yeah.
And from the Mokelumne, there are 2 spots. The high country gets it out of Tiger Creek, and we pump up the canyon about 1,200 feet. Mm-hmm. And the lower end comes out of Taboo, and is pumped to the Tana Reservoir. And
Taboo is fed by the Mokelumne River as well through a tunnel that comes from the lower part of Tiger Creek. And the Mokelumne River has wonderful water. I mean, we are blessed to have very clean, high quality water.
We get first draw.
And
out of the river.
Okay. And there's not exactly a lot of industry or anything between Tiger Creek and lower down. So maybe people don't even know what the Central Amador Water Project is, and that we've referred to that as CAWP, and that is the upcountry water system. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the flow. Let's follow that from the Mokelumne River to somebody's home in, let's say, Jackson Pines.
Okay, well, as we said before, the water is drawn out of the Mokelumne River at Tiger Creek Reservoir and pumped up the canyon to the Buckhorn Treatment Plant, and from there it's dispersed to the houses.
So it goes uphill, a couple of pump stations, because it has to go uphill quite a bit to get to. And if you've ever seen, there's a water tank in Buckhorn on the north side of the highway. And that's where the water treatment plant is. Mm-hmm.
To get a good idea, the incline, you have to drive down Tiger Creek Road, and it's quite a long, steep road into the canyon, and then the water's pumped up that. So it's not an efficient way to deliver water.
Right, and we'll talk about this a little later, but it is one of the problems that's going to create some of the costs for the upcountry system. So then from there, the water goes out. There used to be a number of small community wells that are now all tied together that create that Central Amador Water Project, but which is really just one great big distribution system upcountry.
Well, everybody who was here will remember the droughts of 76 and 77, and that's those little wells up country all started to go dry, and so as an emergency measure, that the system which we now have was put in place with pipe as they could find it, which wasn't
bringing
even
the water from the river instead of from the ground.
And the quickest way, not necessarily the best way, but the quickest way, because it was solving an immediate problem, and that's the system we have that's now 35 years old.
And separate from that is the system that takes water from the Mokelumne and sends it to the lower foothills. So how does that path go?
Well, again, that's out of Lake Taboo.
I think we have a photo of Lake Taboo.
If you're familiar with that.
Yeah. Great place to fish.
From there, it's piped to the Tana Reservoir, which is, if you drive along for upcountry residents, if you drive into town on Ridge Road, you'll see some reservoirs on the left as you're just heading into Sutter Hill.
Right where the water agency offices are.
Right, and that's where the water treatment plant is, and from there it's dispersed to Plymouth, Ione, Sutter Creek, Jackson, and Dry Town.
Pipelines run to Plymouth, to Ione,
Into Jackson.
to Jackson, and then a distribution lines run into Sutter Creek from
Right.
Sutter Hill there.
That's correct.
Right. So that's probably the bulk of folks that are essentially getting water from the Mokelumne River one way or another.
Yes.
in
That's
those
it.
two separate systems.
Right.
Now the canal, what role does the canal play? in
Well, the
that?
canal used to play a greater part because the water was totally delivered through the canal. And then a few years ago, it was piped. There are still people drawing water out of the canal, which is actually a problem because it's not treated. And while people on the canal are not supposed to be using the raw water to
To
drink,
drink.
there is that possibility, and the state is mandating that we eliminate that.
It's interesting that this canal that was built in the 1800s to move water mainly for industrial purposes, lumber and
Lumber mining.
mining,
Mining,
right?
right.
And the water was needed, and they could run it downhill. But we've got, and not only in our county, but in Tuolumne County and some of the northern foothill counties, the canals still run all around and still carry water for.
Within this county, as I hike some of the old ranches and some of the areas, there's still evidence of more canals that are in place.
Yeah, canals that are, yeah.
It's interesting that, we have a maximum amount of water we can take out of that river. And when it was coming down the canal, about half of it was disappearing. So we weren't doing a very good job of conserving a finite
So
resource.
evaporation,
leaks, seepage, plus canal blowouts, a lot of high maintenance. It's
dead animals in the.
Right.
Now, Lake Comanche, you mentioned, has a well system. They do not get Mokelumne River, even though they're down near Comanche.
Right.
They don't get Mokelumne
Yeah,
River.
Right now, they're on wells. They're sort of on the eastern end of the San Joaquin Aquifer, and so with wells come well problems. The wells lose production. They tend to they have higher contaminants that have to be treated out.
The mechanisms of wells more
There's-
complicated.
They are you have to pump water out of the ground, so you have to pay for all that electricity. And Lamel is far removed from any of our other distribution systems. It's a little system with just 50 connections.
So
50 plus
Lamel Heights,
connections.
it's up off Shake Ridge Road.
Yeah, it's Mellow
right?
Drive, right.
Lamel, right? Okay,
Right.
so and there's just one subdivision with
that's
one
it.
well, but the water agency manages
Yeah,
that for them.
It's another system where a developer built a system and then people ask the agency to take it over. And so that's the way the agency has a lot of its systems.
Running Gold, for example, had their own water system, but with all the state mandates, they could not afford to do it, so they asked the water agency to take it over. Same as I think Lamel.
So we really have what I think of as a patchwork of some systems that are pretty new, some systems that are probably, I bet you there's 100-year-old pipes in Sutter Creek and maybe older. Plus we've got an open ditch that carries some water. Plus you got some brand new stuff, brand new big pipeline that now runs from Taboo to Tanner, carrying most of the river water. But that's a whole lot of things glued together.
It's just
one way or another.
It's I want to call it an engineering challenge to have that many different environments that you have to operate in, and the same result has to happen in all of them, that you have to have clean, safe drinking water.
Sure. Now they're separate, but are they separate financially? How does that work? They're separated physically, but are the four water systems separated?
They were separated financially. We are headed towards what I'm going to call a consolidated rate structure, where everybody pays exactly the same for water.
Because there used to be even more separate systems, right? They've slowly been.
Well, there were in the original CAWP when the agency was asked to take over all the CAWP systems. There were a whole bunch of separate districts in CAWP, most of which have now been consolidated into
the CAWP.
In accounting, it's an allocation nightmare, trying to keep track of where each employee spends their time and the cost allocated to each particular district.
Customer service and I get a phone call from Comanche, and then I get a phone call from Pine Grove, and then I get a phone call. So those costs are combined, I would assume.
Yeah, we just I'm going to call those overhead costs, and those are the bill is a combination of fixed costs and commodity costs, which are proportional to the water that you use.
What about improvements to the infrastructure? For example, if I live in Sutter Creek, And then folks have heard about the gravity supply line. That's a new project that is been approved and will be built soon for the upcountry. In Sutter Creek, am I going to pay for the gravity supply line or for a new well in Comanche?
No.
How does that
No,
work?
a lot has been said about that, and people are hearing that they are going to be paying for the gravity supply line, although it seemingly does not directly benefit them. But the fact is, they're not.
They're not.
They are not going to be paying for that. It is going to be borne by that particular area. And most of it, fortunately, is coming from grants.
So service areas are responsible for their own infrastructure, for paying for, through their rates, their own infrastructure.
They carry their own debt.
Improvements and loans.
Right.
And some of them have had some big ticket items. A new well in Comanche, but Comanche has had quite a bit of grant money coming its way as well.
We just, if we couldn't get state grants, it would be a completely different picture. Unfortunately, the state we have the ability to get grants to do infrastructure improvements, infrastructure replacements.
Is that because we are rural? I'm just thinking about, how big of an area from way up in Sierra Pines all the way down to Comanche and Plymouth
Sure.
and all, and so but there's not very many customers relative to an urban area.
Well, I always say that in San Francisco, for example, a mile of pipe might service 10,000 people. A mile of pipe in some areas might service 100 here. It's just the cost for delivering water is higher per unit. Although I think if you compare the rates of the water agency to outlying or surrounding areas, I think they're pretty comparable.
Oh, really?
In spite of that.
Because we don't have a lot of people to share the cost of the
Yeah.
It's true for everything in this
Right.
county.
Right,
There's
that's
just
true.
not a lot of people to support the systems.
and that's the way we like it.
Yeah. Well,
There's
a lot of people do.
There are pluses to that rural lifestyle.
Sure.
And-
So how do you, as financially, how do you manage that? I mean, you've got a whole lot of facilities. Some of them are old. Some of them were built for vacation homes, not for year-round living. There's more people here than there used to be, and you don't really
It's
have
just,
more money.
it's like in your own household.
I'm sorry, they tell me we are out of time, so we are going to take a break, and when we
Okay.
come back, we'll talk a little bit more about the challenges of maintenance.